George R. R. Martin has been struggling to release The Winds of Winter, and many have speculated what exactly is holding him up. Do you think it's a particular character or plot that's preventing him from finishing this next installment?
I think he's got the story pretty much figured out on like the large scale, like where stuff's beginning and where stuff's ending for the big characters. I think he's got it down. Individual characters, though, and the way they get to these points, I think it's a big problem. I think there are several characters, especially Dany. Dany is the biggest one because she's arguably the main character with Jon Snow, if not just her. Like, we don't know. Maybe it's a little obvious if she sits the throne in the end, but it's definitely possible. And she has no perceivable weakness to exploit. And by that, I mean, like in the story, dude, she has like 3 nuclear launch codes, the most powerful force in Planetos, the dragons. They could take care of any physical threat for her. So really that just leaves like, if people arrive that somehow hurt the ones that she loves, the ones closest to her, or maybe I guess you could have some kind of a deal where somebody like Missandei is kidnapped and she has to like sacrifice a dragon in order to get her back. But I don't think she would, because these dragons are like family. And then if the whole idea is like she had to sacrifice Missandei and that sacrifice alone is supposed to make her character compelling, it's just not that believable. And George is no idiot, man. Like, he's not just sitting there completely isolated sensory deprivation chamber, not aware of the reception that both the TV show arc for Dany got, which was not good, and his chapters in the books. Like how many times have we seen on a meme page somebody post a meme? It's like me every time a Dany chapter comes up, and then it's like a guy with a revolver to his head, like somebody who blew their brains out, right? Something like that. And I understand, and that same thing goes for Bran. But what could he do to really make her compelling? We've already seen her go through pretty much the whole moral spectrum of issues and, good and bad. Maybe if she lost all 3 of her dragons, like all 3 of them died, and then she has to try to conquer Westeros without dragons. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, well, let us know down in the comments. What would you suggest to make Dany compelling as a character? Because I'm in the same boat as you. I do not find Dany's plot that compelling. I think it's very generic when it comes to a lot of fantasy and, just storytelling in general, that, she's going down this path of like, oh, I have nothing, and then I have these dragons, and all of a sudden I'm rising up. And it's original, but it's not so much where I feel like, oh, it's so compelling with all the intrigue that's happening around her, right? It seems like everything's on easy mode for her, and then when it's not on easy mode, it's just overwhelming for her, and then eventually she just has to use the dragons or burn them all to get out of it. And I think the arc that she's going to be having by the end of Winds of Winter is that she just wants to, everything's fire and blood, right?
Yes.
And then at that point, I really do think to make her more interesting, you have to have her lose something that's really close to her, which would be one of her dragons. And maybe Euron takes a dragon by the end of Winds. And I think that would be very interesting to see. Would that be more interesting for her to deal with, like the fact that one of her basically children has been taken away from her?
One of the best ways Dany's story could go is to arrive in King's Landing. Basically, young Griff is sitting on the throne as like a Targaryen king, like the successor, to Aerys II. And Dany shows up with her dragons. There's a scuffle. Maybe Varys gets involved. And Varys, being this kind of double agent character, could pretend to even maybe be an objective figure, or maybe even more pro Dany. Like, hey, Dany, like, don't worry about it. This guy's a total fraud. Just present the situation to court and say, if this man is a true Targaryen, he should be able to command a dragon. And then he does successfully command a dragon. You know how cool that would be, dude? It'd be super cool.
Yeah,
and then Euron could take the other one with his horn, Dragon Slave Master 5000 or whatever it is. Speaking of Euron, I think that he is basically the exact opposite of Daenerys when it comes to a writing obstacle, because it's like true, we don't know that much about him. However, he is a blank slate, and he doesn't have all of these previously established character connections and interactions with relevant people, Like, compare that to somebody like Littlefinger or Dany, right? They kind of have to go a certain way, or they have a lot more maneuvering to do. Euron is kind of a force of nature who can do whatever he wants. Like, George can just kind of write the story and then fill Euron in the middle, right? And basically have him take responsibility for damage. Like, do you think Euron is an obstacle for him at all, or no? Because I have seen people say that yes, but I think it's exact opposite.
Well, we know Aeron Damphair is going to have a POV chapter within the Winds of Winter, the Forsaken, right? Which is, I think people have just claimed as one of the best, release chapters they have had for the Winds of Winter. I think Euron is probably going to be the best used from a distance with just, momentarily glimpses into his personality and his motivations versus, with like Robb Stark. I think George does this a lot, and I think some of those characters are more beloved for that reason. Like Robb Stark, Stannis, Tywin, they don't have POV chapters. We get to see them kind of in their form from a distance, like as they manipulate the game and the board around them. And I think it makes it more interesting. I think that's just George is going to do, and I don't know if I think that's difficult at all for him to do. I think it's, like you said, with Dany's way more difficult because you have to show her POV. Dude, with dumb Dany, no brains, trying to figure out what's going on around her. I don't think Euron is difficult for him at all, and I think his path has been set as well. I don't see why Euron would be difficult at all.
Daenerys Slowborn, the Unlearned. I think people just have this built up in their mind because Euron is like possibly going to be one of these Act 3 villains, you know, who needs to have this like giant, menacing, threatening actual impact on the world of Westeros, right? Like I guess if he blows the Horn of Winter and takes down the wall, that is like probably in and of itself good enough. But you still don't want to just see him blow the Horn of Winter and then he dies like a nobody, like Sam Tarly hits him with an arrow from down below, you know what I mean, after he blows the Horn of Winter. Like, that's not cool. There needs to be some cool impact. Yeah. And I think people think that that's really difficult to do, but I don't think so. I think he could be the most generic, like a Gary Stu villain who just causes a ton of problems. He's super powerful for no reason. There's still plenty of characters with depth around on both sides, antagonists and protagonists, that could pick up that slack. What do you think about Littlefinger? Because for me, Littlefinger is probably my number 2 character that might be giving George a hard time. And I should say, not just Littlefinger in like a vacuum, but Littlefinger and all the characters that surround him and everybody that he needs to maneuver around.
I don't know how George, I haven't seen anything him mention Littlefinger and the difficulties of writing him, and it mostly be, again, another very interesting character we have no POVs for. It's going to be through Sansa's eyes, or I think it's Elaine, right, her new identity that she adopts. Like, we get to see Littlefinger from afar and not his POV, which makes him more interesting, just like I said with Robb and Stannis. I don't know if it's all that difficult for him, but whenever me and you do our what ifs on this channel, I always have a difficult time with Littlefinger because he does see the board so clearly and wants to create chaos, but also just do it at the exact right moment. And he's been able to do it thus far perfectly, like a masterclass of it. So why do you think Littlefinger's so difficult?
Yeah, listen up, sweet lips. I'm going to tell you exactly why it'd be difficult for Littlefinger. He is a villain that is definitely going to be an Act 3 of this like overarching Song of Ice and Fire story villain. He has to be, and he is so well positioned in the world. He has so much very specific control of very specific areas and very specific allies, and we know his backstory. We don't know Euron's backstory. Euron also has no previously established alliances or anything like that, and we know he's kind of a wild card who holds no like moral allegiance, so he could do anything, versus Littlefinger, who we kind of know his deal at this point. We kind of know his code of conduct. We know he wouldn't just, like you say, he causes chaos, which he absolutely does. But that doesn't mean he's just going to go start stabbing random people out in the open and like out himself as just I'm not on anybody's side, right? Like everybody,
right,
they think one way or another about him, but there are a lot of characters who do trust Littlefinger to some extent. And there's a lot of characters who are really relevant, like we talk about it sometimes, like the Tyrells. That is absolutely a potential alliance for Littlefinger. They're not malicious enough to like take a villainous role, I don't think. Maybe they are. I don't know. We'll see what George does with it. But like you say, we try to think about what happens with Littlefinger, and we have a hard time doing it because it is not clear at all. And he's also not like Euron, or let's say if there was a Night King character in the books, which there isn't. He's not just some mindless guy, a force of nature, who can be killed, and then like all of his past stuff is satisfied that way. Like Littlefinger's a villain, and we know he has to die. He has to lose because if he won, if he sits on the throne at the end, dude, that's crazy as shit. That's just, it ain't happening, right? But he needs to be defeated in such a way that's like a true toppling of his intelligence, or like a true mistake that he made. Like, think about what they did in the show. Like, that was kind of the result of what they did in the show, but it was absolutely terrible. So George has to navigate it better than that. He has to die in a more climactic way, and his like toppling has to be more methodical.
I do agree. When you build up such a great villain, such as Littlefinger, who's manipulating the board so well, you can't have him slip on a banana peel and also die, right? He needs to, it has to be poetic justice. It can't just be some obscure, weird thing that happens to him. Or the Deus Ex Weirwood tree where Bran's able to see every move that he makes and is able to counter it, or at least see it happen and then be the witness to his trial, right? You know, Littlefinger, when you pleasure yourself, you do this weird noise. He's like, holy shit, he does know. He's seeing everything.
Right.
Okay, so George R. R. Martin has stated before, he has a difficult time writing times where he has to kill characters, like the Red Wedding.
Yeah, climactic events like that, right.
Yeah, so he wrote all of the Storm of Swords before he came back and wrote the Red Wedding. Do you think he's having a difficult time writing Winds of Winter because the Red Wedding 2, the Frey Fest, is coming up, and he does not want to kill off one of the greatest characters of all time, Walder Frey.
I think that might happen for sure. And listen, okay, in all seriousness, I would hate it, man, if Walder Frey dies. All right, I don't want him to die. He's extremely underrated. We are huge Red Wedding truthers on this channel. Okay, we don't subscribe to this generic morality that people generally have when they look at the Red Wedding. Like, well, Walder Frey killed the main character, who's a good guy. It's like, no, there's a lot more to it. All right, that guy was disrespected. Check out the video we have on the channel about it. Okay, in defense of Walder Frey, it'll change your life. However, I do think that is the plan. That to do a Red Wedding 2 type situation, and the Red Wedding was so impactful. That's arguably like the scene in all of Game of Thrones, right? And A Song of Ice and Fire. That's like the moment that everybody was like, I did not see that coming. That's like, this is like the example of what kind of a writer George is. He's got to follow that up with something comparable in scope and impact, right? If he was going to do a Red Wedding 2, and if he doesn't, it's just kind of falls flat. So yeah, dude, if we're going to talk about plot points that are possibly holding them up, that is a huge one. I mean, what would you even do for the Red Wedding 2? How could you even make it impactful? Especially now that a lot of people like see it coming.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that'll be another video we do where what is the next Red Wedding in the series? Because even though the Red Wedding happens in Storm of Swords, it's season 3 of the TV show, but if you just look at the books, dude, a Storm of Swords, so many things happen. You have Oberyn's surprise death, Tyrion killing Tywin, Joffrey dying at the wedding, right? And then also the Red Wedding on top of it, right? So you have all these events happening in this one book, which really just resets the entire board afterwards. So I don't know if it would happen in, Dream of Spring or Winds of Winter, but we should maybe do a whole speculation. What's the next event like that? Just Red Wedding wise. And let us know down in the comments what you think the next Red Wedding event might be like. Is it going to be the, Euron taking the dragon? Is that going to be kind of a Red Wedding event? Somewhat feeling it's not Red Wedding. That'd be more of like a surprise death, right? Someone's able to take a dragon like that.
That's like everybody's predicting that now, though. It's been so long, and like that is a thing that might need to happen because everybody's having the same conversation as us, right? Like, what could make Dany compelling? Right. Oh, it's her losing a dragon, but like it's almost not far enough now. Like, imagine if he killed Dany. That would be super impactful. We don't like Dany on this channel. That's not even why I'm saying this. All right, I'm not like I don't wish Dany died in the series. That's not like the best choice I think for it. Other than we don't have to deal with Dany chapters anymore, which puts a lot of extra space in the book, right, for stuff we care about. But
yeah.
And the same could be true about Bran, by the way.
It's funny, George calls it the Marinese knot, that it has all these things happening there, but I think it really is the Marinese drying machine, right? And he's stuck. That's the analogy we should put it in. I think he needs a big stepbrother to come help him, push him out of it. Oh, hey, stepbrother Brandon Sanderson. Come help me. Help me get through this.
Time for a pounding, George. But I do think you need to have an actual death. Another thing we could talk about too is the whole Jon Snow situation. I don't think that Jon Snow is like a serious point of trouble for him. I think he's probably one of the easiest characters to write if he already has this like the general story planned out, because he's kind of a Mary Sue type character, a Gary Stu type character.
And I think something that's going to happen in the books, people have speculated as well, that when he comes back, he's not going to be the same. Like we've seen other characters, Lady Stoneheart and Beric Dondarrion, when they come back, they're not the same. There's something of them has died or has left this world. But I think Jon might be closer to himself just because there's another theory that Jon warged into Ghost right before he died, so maybe there's more of his soul in there, or maybe it's still there, but it's more wolf-like when he comes back. He comes back, he's a furry, like Robb Stark did, maybe. Well, that's the other theory, that Robb Stark died twice because he warged into Grey Wind, and he's like, oh, fuck, oh, ah! And he gets killed again. That's a bad luck Brian right there for old Robbie boy.
Yeah, it's a likely story, too. But Jon, I don't think Jon's a problem. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll come back. And if you wanted to really surprise us, though, George, don't have Jon come back. And then what do you do? I don't even know, man. Then you got to rely on somebody like Stannis, right? Like, dude, Stannis is Azor Ahai for real. And speaking of Stannis.
Well, hold on real quick before you go into Stannis.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got to interject here. But Jon Snow, do you think, I think if they bring back Jon, I don't want him to be a POV character anymore because, like I said before, it's way more interesting seeing him and like speculating what's going through his head than actually getting what's happening. Because like Stannis just more stoic and like more mysterious and awesome because we don't get every thought in his head?
Oh yeah, dude, absolutely. Oh, dude, I can't wait to burn my fucking daughter. It's gonna smell so fucking good when that thing's just being singed up there. My wife can't wait. We've been planning this for years, ever since she was born. Yeah, right, exactly. We don't get that. But imagine Jon being dead. He comes back. He's like this new evolved guy, and then you have other POVs like Sam Tarly, and he like has these moments where he's just like, Jon is not the same guy. Like, I greeted him with like our old secret handshake, and he had no clue. He doesn't laugh at any of my jokes anymore. Usually, me and him were tuned in, but nowadays, like we have nothing in common anymore. It's crazy.
Does he have a Mrs. Doubtfire like situation? He walks in on John Peen. He's like, Maester Aemon?
Yeah, maybe he walks in on John peeing, but he's sitting down now. That's a real. That's a mind bender right there. But
yeah, you definitely try to stab him. He's like, for the watch.
Dude, Sam did.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
he grew some balls.
If Sam saw him sitting down peeing, he's like, okay, I gotta make a stand here somewhere. Sam the Slayer is about to take down Jon Snow once again.
Alistair Thorne, I apologize. Like, you were right the whole time. I'm sorry I didn't see it.
What do you think about Jon Snow needs to be brought back? I think that's the big. I think everyone's confirmed Jon Snow's going to be brought back.
Yeah.
But how does he do it? Melisandre might do it, but maybe George's plans this whole time is to have Lady Stoneheart in a very poetic way. Bring Jon back to life by sitting on his face, lip to lip, like
that's a kiss.
Like Beric did.
The true last kiss, right?
But she's in the Riverlands. That's why there's difficulties. Like, damn, I want that up there, but
she could travel. Come on, but think about season 7, season 8 speed, man. They can move across this continent lickety split. I think it could be done. Listen, Lady Stoneheart, even in all seriousness, playing a role in Jon's resurrection actually would be really cool because Catelyn has such a disdain for Jon. But if Catelyn somehow has a realization at a certain point that like this guy is instrumental for something somehow, or maybe it's even just she's aware of like the last will and testament of to make Jon like the Lord of Winterfell, and maybe she like sees past her own shit at some point and honors that by bringing Jon back to life. That would be pretty cool too.
Yeah, that would be cool, especially if she somehow learned like, oh man, I'm such an idiot. Why did I think this was actually Ned's kid? Like he basically spelled it out for me, but I was just so stupid to not see what he was trying to say. Like,
I still think it's his kid.
Me. Yeah, that's true. You do think?
Yeah, Ned Nashara, baby.
Yeah, maybe we'll make that video too. Why? What was it? N plus A equals J.
Yeah, N plus A does equal J. Prove me wrong. Let us know in the comments.
You were saying something about Stannis earlier before I rightly cut you off. Do you think Stannis, his plot line, is hindering George right now at all?
Before I even say that, let's just get something clear. If you interrupt me again, I'm going to delete the channel, and I'm going to cry and cry and cry, throw a huge fit. I don't think Stannis is actually holding George back that much, but I definitely think it's a consideration. The reception wasn't that great for Stannis dying the way he did. And again, maybe George could write it really well in the books to have that death seem impactful. But I just feel like Stannis in the books, he's a character that we know from a distance. Like you say, he's super epic or whatever. But it kind of just feels like we've scratched the surface. Like he's been building up to something very epic and climactic. And I guess they could do that with the battle with the Boltons, but I don't really see it. It's like with Robb Stark dying, right? He wasn't a POV character either. But enough happened with him, and we got enough lore and enough characters that were directly affiliated with his life throughout that it felt like, okay, I guess I wish he didn't die here because we are so connected to him, but also we were so connected to him. So I guess he fulfilled his purpose, and now he's going to be killed before he has a chance to, fall out of prominence as a good character. But Stannis, I don't even think he's like gotten to that point yet. I love Stannis because of his potential. I haven't seen him realize it yet. That's the problem. I don't want him to die preemptively. And I think George realizes that too.
That would be our Red Wedding event where Stannis dies at any point, because we do want to see Stannis here sitting in the Iron Throne as the true Azor Ahai. That everyone's like, he can't be the Azor Ahai because he actually believes it. Shut the hell up. Shut the hell. Ooh, I want to push this person into the locker right now. Give him an atomic wedgie for saying some shit like that. Shut the hell up.
Bring Hollywood-style 80s bullying back.
Yeah. Over the top, swirlies, like lifting a kid's head into the toilet, flushing it. Hilarious.
Dude, beating the shit out of each other. Like literally beating. Can you imagine that? Listen, okay, let us know in the comments too. We went to school in like the early 2010s, right? High school. There was no bullying like that went on in our high school.
No.
There was nothing like that. Let us know if you're old enough, or even if it just happened to you. Is this a real phenomenon?
And you're probably lying if you did say that happened to you. But I think someone needs to do that to George. Like, hey, listen, hey, buddy, what are you doing? Why aren't you in front of your little keyboard and getting all this stuff done? What do you think about that? One thing I think that's distracting George is the war and politics in the world. He's stated this before in his not a blog that the world's kind of depressing. And he's like, oh, I just can't get everything. I just can't even think with all these wars and these political stuff going on that I don't agree with. I'm thinking we need to create a Truman-like show around him where we simulate a world that's the most optimal for him creating winds and then just never let him release from this, chamber, and then he just dies in there. What do you think about that proposition?
Yeah, sensory deprivation. Like, we just leave him in there for 20 years while the world burns around him, and then we send a scout team in there after a while. Like, he's, like you said, he's dead now, but we hope that what we find in there is a completed, winds and maybe even a dream of spring, blood and fire, or whatever.
I'm saying like a Truman Show. Like, we go in and we give them like fake headlines. We're like, hey, the New York Jets are actually doing good this year.
No, I get it. I guess for some reason I'm just imagining it was like all automated. We're not paying any attention. He's just like self-sustaining somehow.
Put it on autopilot.
Yeah, and then we come back in like 20 years later. He's dead. Books are finished. But you know what it would really be, dude? That's wishful thinking. What it really we go in there and it's just going to be sketches and like preemptive descriptions of how many characters' nipples that haven't been explored yet. That's the true writer's block right there.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this and smash that like button.
Or not. We don't care.